Basically, our global institutions are now admitting that neoliberal capitalism might not be all it's cracked up to be.
That's because there's no such thing as neoliberal capitalism. There is only capitalism, and capitalism is the separation of the economy from government. It's the free market economy, and to say that you live under a capitalist system today or live under capitalism today is inaccurate.
So, what are our global institutions proposing as a solution to these pretty obvious facts that we're only somehow realizing right now? Radical revolution of the global political economy, radical redistribution. No.
So the main issue with the whole thing of this radical redistribution of wealth is more so to do with the very fact that you're faced with the economic calculation problem. The second thing, you cannot multiply wealth by division. In other words, all you have is what's there in quantity, and redistribution doesn't create wealth, it doesn't add to it. All you're doing is redistribution, you're dividing. Now, it's capitalism that is all about the trade, and it's capitalism that produces all the capital, such as the machinery, etc. There's not enough resources to go around everyone. So since there's scarce resources, how do you ensure that you're going to use those resources efficiently? How do you ensure this egalitarianism? There's going to need to be an entity there to ensure that. Now, you're faced with the economic calculation problem. Therefore, you don't know the information of what to produce more of, how much to produce, where to allocate the valuable scarce resources, what to invest more in. Since you don't hold that information, and socialism is faced with this problem as it distorts the information of profits and losses via government price controls, how do you ensure this equality, all in the name of this radical redistribution of wealth?
So basically, all those really terrible social and environmental externalities of capitalist growth itself? Well, all we have to do is just section those parts out, and then we'll be good, really. That's all we have to do.
Like I mentioned to you in a previous video, everything to do with private land ownership, there is the incentive to improve the lot of the land. There is no incentive to depreciate the value of the land. You have no substantial evidence, not from what I've seen, of capitalism causing such a mess and disaster to the environment. Your idea of capitalism isn't even capitalism, because you're living in the absence of capitalism, and I wouldn't be surprised if you're the sort of person who would go as far as to say that the United States of America or Great Britain somehow lives under capitalism today. The other issue being is this idea of externalities. Again, like I pointed out before, with externalities, private landowners have the incentive to appreciate the value of their land. Your land can either depreciate in value or it can appreciate in value. Show me the incentive of any private landowner to depreciate the value of their land. There's no incentive at all, is there? Of course not. If a private landowner wishes to sell their land on at a profit, they're going to need to appreciate the value of their land. And the only way they're going to do that is look after their land.
So the UNEP acknowledges that there are limits to growth, like biophysical limits to growth, but they still maintain that growth itself is a necessary precondition to getting everybody out of poverty somehow. Again, this totally ignores the fact that economic growth actually produces and relies upon the production of inequality and poverty for growth itself, through imperialism, etc. So the prospect of sustaining growth without inequality is already pretty suspect, unless there were radical redistributive policies put in place. So they're kind of admitting that resource consumption is still one of the main measures of economic prosperity, but saying we need to raise everyone's economic prosperity who is in poverty without raising consumption, actually reducing consumption. So their current stance is that theoretically, we could have infinite growth in GDP for every country on this finite planet.
What you fail to comprehend, Mexie, is the fact that that's not what the study of economics is about. The study of economics is a question. How do we better improve the material standards of living of the masses whilst using the fewest resources as possible? That's what economic efficiency is all about. And the reason why the study of economics exists is because there's not enough resources to go around everyone. The word scarcity simply means the very fact that there isn't enough to go around everyone, that people's expectations exceeds economic reality. In other words, people's expectations are far above and beyond that of what is actually available to them. That's why the study of economics exists. Therefore, we need to economize to ensure that we allocate valuable scarce resources into commodities to provide for the market whilst using the fewest resources as possible, and also to ensure that we're not causing waste. The information of profits and losses and prices in general plays that important role, because prices serve a purpose, and when government interferes with those prices and distorts that information, socialism ends up causing waste. That's the problem with socialism, but that's another story. How do you maximise your profits? You maximise your profits by minimising your costs. And therefore, to minimise their costs, they're going to use fewer resources. They will use fewer resources because it costs you more to use more resources. So therefore, the most successful businessman is going to be the very person who uses fewer resources, and it is for that reason and that reason alone why John Davison Rockefeller wiped the floor with his competition.
So, okay, socially and economically, like I've talked about before, the way of making profits in a capitalist society is number one, appropriating the surplus value of labor. Number two, externalizing costs like environmental costs. So if producers actually tried to redress these two things, like the social and economic externalities of growth, and internalize those costs into production, the costs of production would rise dramatically, and therefore the prices of goods would rise dramatically as well.
The problem is, Mexie, is the fact you don't understand the laws of supply and demand. Through increased level of productivity, it does not lead to higher costs. I don't know who told you that information. An increased level of productivity means there's a higher load of supply. Since there's a higher load of supply, there's more of it to go around. And since there's more of it to go around, there's a lower demand. Therefore, there's a lower cost. If you stand in the middle of the Sahara Desert with a bottle of water, and that's all you've got to survive upon, there's a scarcity. And since there's a scarcity and you've got high demand for it, there's a higher cost, there's a higher value. Take the same bottle of water, stand in the middle of Scotland, filled with crystal clear rivers, streams, waterfalls everywhere. Are you honestly trying to tell me the same bottle of water in the middle of the Sahara Desert holds the same value as it does in the middle of Scotland? Of course not, because you can easily pour it out and refill it. So if they increase the level of productivity, they're doing so in order to bring the cost down. That's what makes things more affordable and cheaper for the consumer. When you compare the price of a product when it first comes out on the market to a product later on when more has been produced and more has went around, the cost begins to drop. It doesn't go like, oh well, if you increase the level of productivity, costs drive up. That's completely irrational. So it tells me that you don't understand the laws of supply and demand, but also you fail to comprehend the role of prices and, of course, what prices are. They are not a barrier to getting the things that you want. And what's important is that a high price in the market signifies that there is a scarcity. So how can a higher level of productivity lead to higher costs when a high cost is a signal telling you there's a shortage? That doesn't make rational sense. That's the problem with your entire argument.